Welcome to the Gourds and Pomegranates podcast, talking common sense for church communications. Here's Hannah and Joe.
Welcoming people at the door of a church is more than a polite gesture. It's a ministry of first and last impressions. The welcome at the door is generally someone's first experience of church. A warm greeting can ease nerves, break down barriers and stereotypes, and make people feel more comfortable.
Your local church is your spiritual home. You are not just saying hello, but welcoming them to a family gathering where we want to worship God and grow our relationship with Him and each other.
Thank you to Russell and to Joss for their contributions there and the quotes that started off our episode. In case you've not guessed it from that, we're talking about welcoming today. Maybe the title of this episode was a bit of a clue about that as well. But we're going to have some really practical tips around how to welcome well and who should be doing it. And it's something that we touched on way back in episode 34 when we talked about through the eyes of a newcomer and this idea of looking at the whole experience of church. From before guests arrive, what do they know of you? What do your external comms say about you? And then on to every step they take when they do arrive with you, walking through the door, the signage, the atmosphere, the big things and the little things, and how it might be a helpful process for you to actually walk through those steps physically and walk through that journey to them to see what you could notice, which you could make more helpful. But today we're focusing on the human touch of welcoming and of that first timers experience. What does it mean to help people feel so welcome when they walk through the doors of your church?
I think a big thing is warmth. When you're welcomed warmly, there's a sense of that they're really glad that I'm here. Some people will naturally be more gifted at this and some might need to practice it so it doesn't feel kind of awkward and forced. But inevitably, we do need to think about who is actually going to be doing the welcoming and the greeting at the door. Yeah,
and I think probably in small churches, this will naturally be the pastor a lot of the time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good to meet those who are involved in leading the church if you're coming when you're new. And it can be helpful to break barriers down, that there's not like a kind of, we can't talk to him sort of idea. When that person at the front has already shaken your hand and welcomed you. But even so, your church leaders could probably use some support with it, not least because they probably have 100 other things that are going around their mind on Sunday morning and demanding their attention. So having other people as part of the welcoming team or like a rota is a really great idea. And it also models this attitude of whole body serving, communicating that all types of people are welcome because all types of people are doing the welcoming.
And I think it also helps with actually enabling that opportunity for conversation after the service, because you've already spoken to them, and that's both the welcomers and the visitors, because you've already had that conversation. Hello, so lovely for you to be here. That the after the post-service conversation doesn't feel awkward and forced, because actually, like, you're not having to turn to the person.
It's not just come out of nowhere. And that I think we'll come back to that after service thing because it's such a big thing. But one thing to watch out for is whoever it is, whether it's the pastor or sort of a dedicated team who's doing the welcoming, if they're occupied, now that could be they're called off to do something. It could just be that they're deep in conversation with someone that they're welcoming. If they have to step away, try to have other people on the lookout and ready to sort of step in and help. And that goes a little bit into this team mentality, which we touched on a few times in this series, and I have a feeling we will come back to. Rather than just a rota mentality, there's a sense that you're always switched on to this area that you're called to serve in, and you want to help others on your team, even if you're not officially assigned to it that week on the rota, but you're looking out to step in and help.
I think it's a good habit to have for any position within the church.
Yeah.
And so I think having a variety of people tasked with welcoming sort of totally shares the load, but actually you also need to be careful that it doesn't go too far of the other way. It can be helpful to have regular familiar faces on the team, as well as mixing up. Sometimes it's nice to see some different people, so that when guests return a second time, that seeing someone that they had met the week or in previous weeks, it can really help them to feel at ease because they recognise them and that they're sort of not feeling like they're coming into somewhere new with someone new. And it's especially the case that if the person on the door actually recognises and remembers them, always helpful to remember a name or sort of some fact of something that maybe you discussed previously. Again, it's just really helping people, the visitors, to feel, oh, they're really glad that I'm here, and, you know, helps them to feel valued.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that's something that when we first went to our church, we met Joss, who we'd quoted at the beginning, actually. He was the first person we met through the door. He was friendly, quick win. He shared his own name. Like, It sounds like such an obvious thing, but people don't always do it. So share your name if you're welcoming someone. But it was so good to have that friendly face, someone who you felt instantly like he genuinely cared that you were there. And it also helped, talking of that whole church ministry sort of thing, it helped that he lived quite close to us as well. So all of these things which kind of, you know, you say they happen by accident, but actually you put things in place so that they can happen.
Yeah.
And putting things in place, you know, having some sort of system can really help. Remembering people's names, but even just remembering whether you've met someone can be difficult, especially as your church grows. So having a system, perhaps in something like Church Suite, and we're going to hear more about that in an episode soon. But on the simplest level, you know, even just getting together for a quick chat after the service to say, oh, I met so-and-so today. And people say, oh, I met them. They live at so-and-so. And, you know, by putting those things together, it makes it that much more likely that, you know, it will cement it in your brain and you'll remember the people. And even better, why not actually spend some time praying for those people, you know, committing them to God as they seek to find a place in the church family, whether that ultimately is your church family or elsewhere.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. So speaking of systems, if you're able to capture people's details, it can be a really sort of brilliant way of being able to stay in touch. And it doesn't need to be sort of formal or overcomplicated and having lots of details. But it might just be that your minister can send them a message, a text, WhatsApp message in the week, sort of just saying, oh, it's great to meet you, and, you know, we'd love to welcome you back again to the church. Because it's really important to remember that the sort of welcoming doesn't stop after the service is finished, doesn't stop at lunchtime. You know, once the church building gets locked up, it's actually what happens beyond the Sunday.
Yeah, and I guess it's where the sort of the soft communications of like the people stuff on the Sunday crosses into the more strategic, you know, comms plan type things. But having those next steps for guests, whatever they are, is really important. And you know, if you run events for newcomers, then that should be something that your welcomers know about. They should know the next steps. And it should be really easy for them to share that info with people so that people can sign up, have a QR code, but great, but then don't neglect having an easy URL for it as well, because not everyone will know. I know this from experience. Not everyone gets on with QR codes. So, for example, if you're coming to our church, there is a QR code you can scan, but right underneath it has the easy URL. We have /join, and that will take you straight to the form, which actually gets you onto Church Suite.
Yeah, definitely.
So whatever those steps look like, it's going to be different for every church, depending on what events you have on, depending on your capacity, all that sort of thing. But your welcomers should know the next steps inside out, and they should be able to point people in the right direction.
When it comes to ministry, it's not just the fruit that matters. It's the roots. That's why Stewardship is proud to support this episode. Stewardship is a Christian charity that helps Christians be the best stewards of the resources God gives them.
For churches and charities, this means helping them grow from the ground up. It might be a building project, fundraising support, setting up payroll, or sorting out your accounts. They offer the kind of practical tools that help ministry last.
Real growth isn't just about good ideas. It needs structure, support, and sound, wise governance. Discover more at stewardship.org.uk.
So going back to Sunday mornings, it should be really obvious to guests who your welcomers are. Now, if they're standing by the door, it's going to be relatively obvious, but it's really easy to make it even more obvious. So you might have a lanyard or even a t-shirt if you want to go real like hipster. It doesn't have to be a difficult thing, but like just marking people out so it's obvious who to talk to. And this doesn't have to end when the service starts. You know, sometimes welcomers are most necessary for those who arrive a little bit later and don't have the luxury of that pre-service time to kind of settle in and find their place.
Yeah. And then during the service, wherever possible, your welcomers should sort of try to make an effort to be somewhat sort of obvious and clearly sort of indicated, because it may be that a visitor has forgotten to ask something and they need to sort something during the service. So if you see someone sort of looking around or getting up and, that kind of like slightly confused, lost look, make sure that there is a welcomer still visible and sort of has an eye out for those people and that they're able to help them. And yes, it might be a bit annoying, sort of, and it comes at the cost of sort of having to be taken out of the service and not being able to listen to what's happening. But actually, it serves so much more in terms of serving on behalf of the church, and actually just really speaks volumes to the guests about how much you value them. And it also sort of might spare them the embarrassment of walking out of the wrong door when looking for a toilet, try to end up walking into a vestry or something, and or ending up in the Sunday school class when they're sort of doing the kind of like, I need the toilet jiggle slightly.
Our church buildings, understandably, it can be a bit of mazes and can be hard to navigate. So just looking out for people. Something else I've noticed is that the best welcomers, those who tend to be the best at welcoming people, will ask questions, and it's not in like an obtrusive or an interrogative type manner. It's still warm, but these helpful questions that move the conversation along, that stop it being just small talk, but also give guests an opportunity to ask their own questions without feeling silly. So asking them something like, do you know where everything is? Or did you know about the creche or where to park your pram? Obviously, that requires a bit of observation. That is a question that you're not going to ask an old couple without children that come in, but you might ask that of a young family. Or asking someone, are you okay finding a seat yourself, or would you like a hand? People might be embarrassed to ask these sorts of questions, or just shy. So if the welcomer is asking and giving permission to ask questions and offering to help, then that can be really helpful. And it does require a little bit of judgment in the situation, and perhaps even sometimes risking embarrassing yourself that maybe you asked the wrong question. But I think I'd rather that, as a welcomer, I'd rather be embarrassed than my guest feeling embarrassed.
Yeah, definitely. I have to say, I have had some experiences where I have had loads of questions asked, but they have been it has felt obtrusive and interrogation like, of not thinking about the right questions, of going, have you been here before? And I'd say, yes, I grew up in this church, actually. Like, I know most of you. I just haven't been back in years because I've been elsewhere and stuff. But no, they didn't ask that. They said, are you a visitor? Are you a student? And then I said no. And maybe I'd made a comment about my husband and I. Oh, how many children do you have? And I was like, you've really actually annoyed me.
There's a line, isn't there, between sort of like, being willing to be a bit embarrassed and just asking the wrong question. I mean, I know that when we were visiting a church to look around, and it probably was never going to be the right spiritual home for us, but we wanted to give it a chance because it was the nearest church. And 3 different people asked us if we were there because our bands were being read. And that told me all I needed to know about the church, because it told me that they only get young couples
coming in
who are there to have their bands read.
Yeah. But also, it's just such an assumption. It's, why can't you ask, like, do you know where everything is? Of the same vein of that, of like, have you been here before? Do I need to tell you where the toilets are? Or actually, I don't know, just the assumption that the only reason I was there because I was a holiday maker, as opposed to, no, actually, I'm really looking for my spiritual home in this community. Yeah. And I think there's just, some preparations. And
preparation is the right word, I think, because it's a bit of tact. And that's why, we say being a welcomer is not necessarily for everyone. If you have someone who is known for asking awkward questions and being just a bit socially awkward, they're probably not going to be the best person to welcome people. But equally, even for those who are and who do it regularly, having a list of questions, having some occasional training, dare I say, that you can have some questions that you go to that can still get the answer that you're looking for by finding out if someone's a visitor. You can ask soft questions like, can I help you find anything? And they will probably reveal that, it's their first time there, or actually, no, I'm all good, and you get that answer anyway.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And I would say, actually, I think there's also of the other end of the scale of being too overly friendly. And I've also had this recently in a church I do regularly go to now, different church. And they're big huggers. And like, that's lovely. And I am a hugger with people I know and I'm comfortable with. But I have to say, there are times I'm like,
Yeah.
I
We shouldn't assume
I don't really
that.
want to do that at the minute. Like, I don't know you well enough, and you seem to hug me every time you see me on this Sunday. And I just and again, I feel like some people really like it. Like, I've had this conversation with my mum, and she said I really like being hugged. It's, feels very nice and welcoming. I'm like, cool, but also they should read that some people, especially in a post-pandemic era, where actually suddenly now people are extremely aware of getting close to unknown people, but that sort of thing of just, again, being aware that yes, you need to be friendly, but also be aware that not everyone is going to be comfortable with you getting right in their face if you don't really know them.
Yeah. So we heard from Joss at the beginning of the episode, and another of his observations that I wanted to share is that most of the welcoming happens after the service over coffee, rather than necessarily at the front door.
Yeah.
That welcoming is helping people to feel a sense of warm belonging rather than just saying hello as they arrive. And this time after the service can also be a really great time to be on the lookout for potential welcomers who you might want to add to the team. The people who are already going out of their way to make sure that others aren't feeling left out and that no one is just standing on their own with no one to talk to. That is often a trait of someone who will be a really good welcomer and who is putting other people's needs before their own. Bringing us into land then, have a plan for the edge cases. If people have additional needs or just need a bit of extra help, do your welcomers know what to do in those situations or how to handle it? Is there a point at which they need to flag down subtly a church leader to come and help them? Something that we had a lot in my previous church in the town centre was homeless people coming in. And that's great. Like, they need to hear the gospel too. But there would be some situations where people were getting a bit uncomfortable and you needed the more experienced welcomers or perhaps the church leaders to be on the lookout. And often those more experienced welcomers knew them by name and could do a better job of sort of speaking to them and being warm to them anyway. Again, the answers will look different in practice for the sorts of people that you get coming into your church, and you can't have a plan for everything, but just having an awareness of what people need and trying to put their needs first, but doing it in a way that is obviously keeping everyone safe and somewhat happy as well. And that just comes back to the training. Something that we're really pushing with teams at the moment is the importance of meeting together outside of planning stuff. In maybe your welcoming team doesn't need too many planning meetings because it's relatively the same week in, week out, but time for prayer, time for getting to know each other better, but then also occasionally time for training and going over those practical skills that people might benefit from knowing.
Yeah. So the last thing then is to say that welcoming done right is something that should absolutely not be limited to only those who are tasked with greeting people at the door.
Yeah.
As a church, we should be seeking to develop a whole church family culture of welcoming. And even the best, warmest welcome from someone on the door, unfortunately can be totally overshadowed if actually your visitor has quite a cold reception and cold experience from others in the church.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we should be wanting to get to know people and finding out more about them. And this goes for all people that come through the doors, not just for those who would maybe most benefit the church if they hung around because they're going to be, giving more or serving more, but for everyone. And perhaps there's a sense here where I feel a little bit like I'm preaching to the converted because I have seen so many people in churches who are providing such a warm welcome and being so loving to new people, even if it's not something which comes naturally to them. It is hard for us introverts to start conversations with people who we've never met. Let's own that. It's not always easy. but it does truly show God's love to people as our leaders, our greeters, and the wider congregations model this welcoming, loving attitude.
Gourds and Pomegranates is brought to you by Joe Gallant and Hannah Fleming Hill. You can find episode transcripts and contact the show via gppodcast.uk.